in the cannabis plants, you find about 100 psychoactive compounds called cannabinoids. They derive from plants, so they're called phytocannabinoids. In the human body, there's a cannabinoid system, which is a system of signaling cell communication. And there are two receptors, cell receptors, that have been identified, at least two, called the CB1 receptor and the CB2 receptor. So the CB1 receptor is expressed most commonly in the brain, and CB2 in cells in the immune system. So neurons in the brain have a receptor which can be agonized by phytocannabinoids, and the primary psychoactive compound of the cannabinoids is called THC, which makes up at least, I think, 80 to 95% of the total cannabinoid content of cannabis. So THC is a CB1 receptor agonist. So what happens is when it's delivered to the brain in its metabolite form, it activates the CB1 receptor, and then the neurons in the brain then release a chemical, an endocannabinoid called anandamide. And it's called anandamide because anand is taken from Sanskrit meaning bliss, and amide is a reference to its amino acid structure. So it has a scientific name, which I can't remember. So the cannabis plant then contains chemicals which are the same as, or in the same family as, the endocannabinoid system, the endocannabinoid neurotransmitters. So in the brain you have a system called the GABA system, GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, which causes the cells to remain in a state of polarization. So if electric charge is added to a cell, it won't respond, it won't create an electric impulse because it already has a negative electric charge. And GABA is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for causing the cell to be in a polarized state. So what it does basically is it pushes out positive ions, pumps them out, and it pumps in negative ions. And so this induces a negative charge. This is the system that's activated by benzodiazepines, also by alcohol. So because it keeps the cells in your brain, the neurons in the brain, in a state of electric charge, that's called inhibition. So basically that's calmness. It stops neurons from firing, and it induces a calm state. So what's the cannabinoid system, the CB1 receptor agonist anandamide in the brain does is it blocks the activity of GABA, and it causes the cell to go into a neutral electrical charge, meaning it pumps back in the positive ions and out the negative ions. And so what happens now is that the neural membrane has an electrical potential, and it's able then to fire. So the job then of the endocannabinoid system in the brain is to suppress the inhibition caused by GABA. So what this means then is that cannabis is a very powerful drug which is able to cause the cells in the brain to go into a state of being very easy to fire. The neurons will very easily fire. So, and it blocks the system of keeping the neurons calm. So this is probably why people get paranoid when they smoke weed, and why you have very deep thoughts that seem interesting while you're high, because you don't have that regulating that chemical that's regulating the calm state, or call it rationality, filtering out everything coming from the subconscious mind. That's just theoretically. The GABA system is supposed to, in a sense, filter out negative, or not negative, but filter out things coming from the subconscious mind that are not supposed to be in the conscious mind. So so cannabis sort of strips away that rationality mechanism. And why this is important is because if you have electromagnetic energy which is able to interfere with cells, and it even can cause electromagnetic energy, can cause neurons in the brain to fire. So what it does is it pulses against the membrane. It redistributes the ion pumps, and it causes a difference in density on the neural membrane. And because of this, it can then create an electrical gradient on the neural membrane and induce it to fire. So, and I'm talking about scientific papers that have been published, which have tested electromagnetic radiation to see if it can cause neurons to fire, and it has done so. There's even a patent by an inventor called Henricus Lewis, who basically he invented something that you could use a monitor, a screen, to pulsate electromagnetic energy to manipulate the way your body feels. And there's other science as well, which says that electromagnetic energy can induce a neuron to fire. Now, if you're smoking weed and you have a lot of cannabis in your system, and remember, cannabinoids are lipophilic, so they stay in the cell membrane for a long time. Can be up to 9 months, maybe even more. Depends on how heavily you smoke or ingest cannabis. So what happens then is that your neurons are put into a very ready state, ready to fire. So you don't need much work from the electromagnetics perspective to induce neurons to fire, because you have a lot of THC in the brain, which is already stripped away the negative charge of the neurons, and so your neurons are easily in a state, or in a much easier state to be caused to fire. And why that's important is because that is the reason why electromagnetic energy, basically microwaves that we use to communicate through our cell phones and Wi-Fi and such things, or with satellites like Starlink. The purpose of these things is to use them to manipulate the brains of humans. That's the reason why it exists. There's no other reason. And electromagnetic energy is the light that comes out of matter. It's the photon particle wave. So, and the gods of photon particle waves are, I suppose, what they call Lucifer in Latin, or Mithras, or the Aten in ancient Egyptian religion. And so we're living in that kingdom of the Aten, kingdom of Lucifer, where the whole world is covered in electromagnetic energy. And so you have the system set up to be able to manipulate human brains. And that's why it's dangerous to be ingesting weed, because your brain is in a much easier state to be caused to fire.